Okay, we're live.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to our live talk show called Downright Capable, Changing the Way Others View Down Syndrome. My name is Brian Herndon. I'm a parent of a child with Down syndrome and an advocate. And I would like to welcome my co-host, Marla Marasco, who's also a parent and an advocate. If you're watching this on replay, we want to welcome you as well and let you know that you can still comment and share the show. So make sure to stick around with us to the end, and we're going to share some great resources. Marla, I'm very excited about our show today because we have our first guest speaker, Courtney Hansen. Can you share a little bit with us about Courtney?
Sure, yeah. So, yeah, I am actually excited about our show today, Brian. We're calling the show Parent Advocacy, Navigating the Sea of Change. And I am excited because Courtney is our first guest. So Courtney Hansen, she blogs at Inclusion Evolution. And I just wanted to let you know first that we are going to be sharing with you the links that we refer to here on the show. So you don't have to worry about that. But yes, I am excited about our show today and to bring Courtney on with us. Let me bring Courtney on. Hold on one second, guys. All right, so let me just introduce Courtney and tell you a little bit about her. She is the mother of three. She has a little girl and twin boys, one with Down syndrome. She has a master's degree in secondary education, and she is a special education advocate at Council on Parent Advocates or Parent Attorneys and Advocates.
That's right.
So Courtney, welcome to the show. Thank you for taking some time to be with us today.
Thank you so much, Marla. And I'm honored to be your first guest, and I've learned a lot from Brian. I've followed him for a long time, and Marla, it seems like you both will have so much to give to your audience. And I think the Facebook Live is great. Even if you can't watch it live, I think it's a great way to connect to parents. And you both are great parent advocates. So thank you for allowing me to be here. I do have twin boys that have just started kindergarten in a new state. So it's been a lot of change. I have a daughter too that's in preschool, but they've been extremely adaptive and resilient, like most kids are. It's amazing. I had a lot more fear going into it than I think they did. And so I have been preparing for this, for years. Really, honestly, my advocacy journey started honestly when they were born. So like all parents, when you're faced with that diagnosis, either at birth like I was, or pre-diagnosis, you want as much information as you can get. And so I didn't know anything. Although I had an education background, that kind of told me that to have the best success, the parents got to be involved and engaged. So I knew that much, but I didn't know where to start. And so like most parents, I started on Facebook, maybe some people tuning in today, and it opened my eyes, really. They say social media can be a curse or a blessing, but for me, it was eye-opening. And it showed me really the adults with self-advocates and the parent advocates like Brian and Marla who paved a way forward for myself and my son. And that's where I started. And now my kids are in kindergarten, and I've worked to make sure that they're in the same class, have the same teacher. My son with Down syndrome is fully included all day long, but it was a lot of work. And you don't really have to know everything. You just have to know where to look for that information.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Courtney, can you share with us what you mean? I saw on your website, you mentioned equitable inclusion, and I love that. So can you just kind of share with us a little bit about what you mean by that?
Sure. Yeah. Honestly, having twins is kind of the best description of equitable inclusion, because from day one, I'm comparing them. Having a twins, like social media, is a blessing and a curse. You have that instant play buddy, but our hearts at first were thinking, would they ever play together? We had no idea. My husband just finished med school, and he kind of had that medical model of Down syndrome, which we honestly have gone past. Most us parent advocates realize that there's a lot more to our children than that. My husband does now too. And so we, did compare, but in some way it became a blessing because I knew I needed to set high expectations, and I used my typical son to know where he needed. I was a brand new mom. I honestly just didn't know, sometimes when they should be doing certain things. And so I could use that as a gauge. But then I also realized I wanted them to be together, and I wanted them to learn the same content. And so starting from day one, I wanted to find out how I could do that. And so they are in the same class, they're learning the same content, but fair isn't always equal. And so that equitable inclusion means we don't just throw the kid into general education and say, great, we've done inclusion. You know, that's not inclusion. And so my son, even though he's learning the same kindergarten content, there's accommodations. He can't always do the expressive reading test. He's not going to be able to tell you expressively everything he knows, but he knows so much. And so I've had to help our IEP team understand that he has apraxia, that it's not just Down syndrome, that he needs accommodations for that test to really show them what he knows. Yeah. And we've been able to work together on that. So.
Well, Courtney, that's I'm glad you shared that, because I'm actually, as you know, I'm a professor as well as a parent, and I teach a special education course, and we talk about how fair is not always equal, and kids need to get what they need in order to be successful.
Right.
Really glad that you're being a voice for that. So you obviously moved, and I've recently moved as well. So we're in similar waters here. Yeah. But tell us a little bit, how have you gone about navigating that move as a mom, as an advocate? How has that been for you?
Yeah, well, I knew my husband's in the military, and I knew that we would be moving a lot. So I realized when they were in preschool that I needed to learn more, because not only were we moving up to kindergarten, but we were moving to a new state. Yeah. And so I started really small. I was on Facebook. I did webinars, like things like this. And then I attended some Down syndrome specific conferences, or at least just did phone conferences if you can't make those conferences. And then I went on to Wright's Law, and I know Marla has some links for Wright's Law, a great resource. Even if you can't go to the conference, you don't have to know about education or the law to learn and get all of that valuable information from those conferences. And so I devoured Pete Wright's book, who's the creator of Wright's Law, his book, Emotions to Advocacy, and realized that I could be an expert. Yes, there it is, Marla. That's right.
Not a very good Vanna White girl, but yes, this is the book.
Yeah, love that book. Love it. And so that kind of just was my getting my feet wet, right? Yeah. And so I learned that I could be the expert at the IEP table. Why couldn't I give IEP goals? Maybe I couldn't specifically write a SMART goal, what they're looking for, but I could give them, I could tell them what my son's been working on in the previous state and what I think he should be working on moving forward based on the kindergarten curriculum. So I looked up the kindergarten curriculum. I started learning about the law. I don't know every piece of that law at that point when I was doing Wright's Law, but I knew enough to ask questions. And then from there, I realized, I could not only help my son, but maybe help others. And so with the kind of prodding of a great advocate in Cincinnati, I decided to do the Council of Parent Advocate or Attorneys and Advocates, COPA, their year-long training. But I'll tell you, if you're a parent out there and you're thinking, I either can't afford or don't have the time for a year-long training, COPA did just open up a 10-week, 10-day, so it's 1 day a week, parent training. It's very affordable, and it's very, very good. It's going to really kind of get you in there and understand what the law is and what your child's rights are. So
is that online? Is that okay? So that's kind of a virtual training.
So the year-long training that I did was all online. We did a live session, but honestly, there is no certification for advocacy. So if anybody's telling you they're certified, it's just not true. There's parents out there, and honestly, a lot of the attorneys I talked to said the best experts are the parent advocates.
Right.
They know and understand it. So.
Well, and to your point, Courtney, I mean, you, like you said, you weren't an expert in all these things, but you're an expert on your child.
Right.
And so, because you were an expert on your child and because you knew your child best, you had to kind of be a voice for your child in order to be to have a voice at the table, really.
That's right.
And that's the thing, is you are an active member of that team. And I think that's, unfortunately, a lot of parents get scared about that. They don't think they have a voice, and they really do. And that's what's really important. And that's what I think this show is about, is that, parent advocacy, and you need to play a critical role in that IEP team.
That's right. Yeah.
So, Courtney, you took it upon yourself to kind of educate yourself. You had an education background, but you were secondary. And so you're obviously working with, a toddler going into school.
Right.
So you educated yourself, but what made you decide to kind of formalize it, I guess, and go through COPA to get more specialized training? What was your decision? How did you come about that?
Well, number one was Troy, my son with Down syndrome. I had to figure out how I was going to get him fully included. And I knew, even though it's been 40 years since IDEA was passed, that a lot of parents are still struggling. And so that was my reason number one. And I was successful after COPA and going into the school in Ohio where he was leaving and making sure that IEP was specific and everything was written down, because they say, the saying is, if it's not written down, it does not exist. And that
right.
is true.
Absolutely. Yep.
So, maybe things that they were doing in class that I thought worked, but weren't in the IEP, I told them, hey, listen, we're moving a lot. And, you can do this in an extremely polite and respectful way, but just tell them it has to be in there because I don't know where I'm moving next. I don't know what's going to happen next.
Right.
And so really, that's kind of how I ended up. And then once I started in COPA, I realized that maybe if I won't go back to teaching when the boys are older, I'll just do some advocacy and I can do what will be helpful for my son, but also will help other people. And so I've started doing that locally and nationally. I'm helping some friends across the country and here locally get IEPs that they deserve and making sure their child has free and appropriate education.
Absolutely.
So do you actually stick with it? And when we look at advocates, because we've gotten that question a lot, is, I've been told that you want to get an advocate who truly is experienced, in the child's disability. So do you go outside of Down syndrome or do you just stick within that wheelhouse, if you will?
I honestly have done a lot of students with Down syndrome, obviously, because I have friends and connections that way. But I have recently done a few cases here with a child that had a feeding tube, one child that had autism. So you can step out of that because the journey is similar in that I know the state law and I know the federal law and I know what that child deserves and has the right to. So, but it is nice to find someone that maybe understands your path. But at the end of the day, if you can find somebody that has empathy and understands the law and is willing to be a voice for you, even if you can't afford an advocate, I would encourage you to go to the Parent Center Hub. I know Marla has a link for that.
Yeah.
Those are the parent training information centers, and that link will tell you the center in your state, and they offer some free advocacy. So if you can't afford it, I would encourage you to seek out an advocate. And at the end of the day, if you can find no one else, please just take a neighbor with you or a friend with you, because honestly, if it's just you and your husband, you have that emotional connection that it's going to be very difficult to be objective. And so having a third party just listen to what was said at the meeting, even if it's just a neighbor, until you can find an advocate, I would encourage you to bring someone. And
Courtney, I'm really glad you brought that up because, I've done the same thing. I'm a little too passionate when it comes to my own child. And I've, my wife and I have brought an advocate before and really and truly it changes the nature of the meeting.
Yes, it does.
Just does. When there's that extra person in the room listening, taking notes, maybe they've got some training, maybe they don't.
Right.
But when there's that extra person in the room, people seem to sit up straighter. They seem to dot their I's and cross their T's a little bit better. Yes. And so absolutely, I think Courtney's right. If you don't have somebody, or you can't afford that, bring someone.
Yeah. Yeah. I just want to ask everybody, where is everybody tuning in from? Because we just kind of want to see where our reach is going. So if you could just drop, what state you're from in the comments, that would be awesome. And I agree with Brian and Courtney we have an advocate as well. And at our last meeting, which was like 2 weeks ago, she turned to me and said, "You really don't need me anymore."
Yeah.
And I was just like, I do actually, because I just need to go and look at you, and that just, the room becomes like, okay, she's coming up with something. So it is important to have that third party person there. Because like Brian said, people do start sitting up and paying attention and, actually wanting to hear what you have to say. So it is good if you have an advocate, if you could find one.
I did see a friend, Courtney, from another Courtney from Washington. So hi, Courtney. I see you on there.
Well, and just to throw it out there, Marla, I know you're in Massachusetts. I'm in Arkansas, and Courtney, you're in Washington State. So, I mean, you know, like you said, federal law applies to everyone from coast to coast.
Right.
And so, you know, it's important to understand that, you know, states interpret things a little differently, and they might put things in practice a little differently, but the law applies to everybody.
Right.
So one thing I wanted to bring up, Courtney, was, you know, I mean, obviously, you know, Marla, myself, and you, Courtney, you know, we've all taken it upon ourselves to educate ourselves, and we've gone through some training and different things. What if I'm a parent and I've got a preschooler and I'm nervous about this, and I just don't know, like, how can I feel comfortable going into that IEP meeting and advocating for my child? What advice would you give to that parent?
I would encourage them to start building relationships with the school first. Obviously, when I was looking for a school, just to kind of start out your search, I started on social media. I you know, kind of stalked, if you want to say, local groups that you know, dealt with special needs. And I asked people what were the good schools. And then I went and talked to those administrators and those teachers. And that really kind of sealed the deal for me. Right. The schools that had an open mindset, that had a good relationship with me when I was chatting with them, I knew that that's where I wanted to be. Right. And then honestly, I made sure that I kept that conversation going with them. But I always made sure that everything was in writing. So I always emailed. I always asked for drafts ahead of time.
Okay, you do that? You can ask for drafts of the IEP?
Yeah. Yes, and I would definitely encourage you. Each state's going to be different. Some states are going to be very specific about the timeline of when they can give you that draft. Right. The federal law says within a reasonable time. So that can be interpreted a lot of different ways. Yeah. But, you know, 24 hours before is not a reasonable amount of time for you to prepare. Yeah. So if you are nervous, you need to prepare. And the best way you can prepare is to know what they're going to say at this meeting. You Absolutely. Have every right to know what's going to be said and spoken about, so that you can prepare and create your own ideas.
Absolutely.
Now, Courtney, do you actually have to, you know, you didn't say it's not a certification, but do you have to like go back and retrain, I guess, if you will?
Yeah. You can always do specific trainings for different disabilities. So I recently went and did an autism conference. I'm hoping to do TASH down in Portland soon.
Okay, great. Yeah.
But part of COPA, at least the year-long training, requires that we do a practicum too. So we have to do 60 to 80 hours with a local advocate, which has been super helpful for me because I'm new to the state. So although I have read the law several times, the state law specifically, and the federal law many times, I just wanted to know the intricacies of the area, right? You don't know people, you don't know the administrators or the school districts. So I sought out a special education advocate here, and I'm working with her and going along with her to some IEP meetings as well as doing some of my own.
Good. And I'm glad that you also brought up, I'm that new parent, I'm coming into the school, just building that relationship with the school. I think it's a lot easier to ask for things when you have a relationship.
Yes.
Or if they know your child. I know we've lived in small towns. And so, for me to come and say that my son goes to Sunday school class and he doesn't have extra help, or that he plays on a Parks and Rec, sports team or whatever, they get to see that he is capable.
Yeah.
And even with some
life outside of the school community too.
Absolutely.
That's
so when I sit in that IEP meeting and I say, hey, I want my kid to be in a reading group, they have some background there because there's a relationship.
Right. I would also recommend reaching high. I know when I left Ohio, I had a pretty stellar IEP. I think some of that was because I had a really good working relationship with the Ohio team, but in some ways they also knew I was leaving. So I would say things like, I want him 100% included. And I think sometimes they looked at me like I had 5 heads, yes. But honestly, they did it. And because I gave them the research, I always showed up with research, and you can, Google research everything and find some make sure you're good at getting good websites, edu or whatever it may be.
Right,
but
right.
I proved my case and they gave it to me. So when I came to Washington State and I showed them this IEP, even if I had to compromise maybe on a little bit of service time or something like that, I had set the expectations so high
Absolutely.
that I was willing to do that. And it showed that I was willing to collaborate, that I was willing to be a partner, that I was willing to step back a little bit as long as they were going to keep those high expectations for my son. So that's another tip that I would recommend.
Right, right, absolutely. So, well, Courtney, tell us a little bit. So I know you also, so as you're a parent, you're an advocate. You also have a blog out there. Or tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I really honestly, the blog was kind of an organic experience out of everything that I've been learning. So when the boys were in preschool, I started taking like the Rights Law conferences and the Down syndrome conferences. And I was learning so much that I thought I need to prepare for kindergarten and primary school. And how am I going to remember all this information? And for me,
Right.
I'm a writer. And so I thought I'm going to start a blog. And then I can just always reference back. But then obviously I can help other people too.
Yeah.
So a little bit of it is storytelling, telling our story. But a lot of the blog, Inclusion Evolution, is just giving tips to myself so that I'll remember these, because there's just so much information out there. But how do you put all that in your mind? And for me, the best way to learn it was just to write it down. And so I have tips on there. I have my information if you would like to reach out to me about advocacy. And I've had some great interviews with other people that have written books. Nicole Reddick's book about modifications was amazing. And so that's kind of, I have some resources on there for advocacy where you can go to look in your state, some education resources. And also I tried to throw in a lot of employment, because all of this is leading obviously to employment. And we know 80% of our kids, when they reach adulthood, are not working. They're sitting at home, group home, and that is the next frontier, and that needs to end. So
that's kind of right where we are at. Jacob is 12, but we know the transition starts at 14. So,
Already.
Website link is below, and again, we will be sharing a resource with all of you with all of the information that we shared here today. So, Courtney, I just want to say thank you again very much for being here.
Thank you.
I know we could probably talk about this. Maybe we will invite you back onto the show. But thank you again very much for being here. We really appreciate all this information.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And Courtney, just to echo, Marla's comments, I think, when we hear each other's stories, that's when it's powerful. And I'm so glad you have that blog, and Marla, and I'm glad that we're doing this, because we share our story, and that's where we connect, and that's where we can understand where people are coming from and the heart behind it all. And you talk about percentages and things like that, but let's put names with those, and when we start to put names with those percentages, it becomes real. And I think that's where there's tremendous power. So I'm glad that you're telling your story, and I'm glad you were here today.
Thank you, Brian. I appreciate it. Thank you, Marla.
Thank you, Courtney. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Well, everyone, we want to really just thank you for being here today. We hope that you enjoyed listening to this topic as much as we enjoy sharing it with you. It's truly our hope that you just see us as regular moms and dads who we've seen the need to be a voice for our own children. And we hope that we've encouraged you to find your voice in this journey. And that you feel like you can start to speak up and speak out and support your child through this process. And there's a lot of resources out there. I know Marla and I will share some resources with you on our page. I know Courtney's got a lot of resources on her blog, but don't limit yourself to us and Courtney. Expand your horizons. Rights Law. There's so much out there.
Right.
So we hope that you're encouraged to find your voice in this journey and to be that voice for your child.
Yeah. And thank you, Brian. And, I want to take a minute to obviously agree with what you're saying and thank Courtney for her advocacy work, because, your voice does matter. And, I spoke about that 2 years ago at the United Nations for World Down Syndrome Day, because if you think about it, your voice really is your child's voice. And
Absolutely.
when you take the time to educate yourself, you are educating, you're educating others. So it is important to take the time to really dig down in some of these laws. And I know it's scary and it's overwhelming, and some of these books look like you're going back to college again, but it really is important. I mean,
it is.
Your voice, it needs to be heard, because it really is your child's voice. You are really advocating for them. So it is important.
And Marla, I haven't heard you talk a lot about it on the show, but I know that you also involve your son in helping him to find his own voice, and you take him to these conferences and you have him speak and share. And I love that like we said earlier, you're putting a name with this.
Well, you're putting a face to a name, really, if you think about it. I could sit here and talk about, my son Jacob, or, my son Nate. And, I mean, like, for instance, yesterday I was on a conference call with the National Down Syndrome Society. He's knocking on the door behind me, and I'm like, oh, come on in, honey, come on in. And, the one girl who works for the National Down Syndrome Society is like, hi, Jacob, so it validated that, we need to give them that platform. We need to get them comfortable, because what that is doing is you're giving them a platform, public speaking, because they're then now becoming that voice. They're now learning how to advocate for yourself. So absolutely, I would, as much as you can, bring your child into the IEP or to whatever, wherever they're going, even if they're checking into the doctor's office. Let them check in for themselves.
Absolutely. And that goes back to what Courtney was saying, is that this isn't just, kindergarten through 12th grade. This is a life.
This is life, right?
It absolutely is. And someday, I mean, we're going to be gone. My wife and I, you and your husband are going to be gone. Absolutely. And our kids are going to need to be able to feel comfortable saying what they want and what they don't want, and hopefully getting jobs and being a productive member of society. And that's what we all hope for.
Yeah, no, it's very true. And so, we just wanted to, again, thank everybody for being here. Thank you, Courtney, for, being a part of the show. We know we probably could have gone into a lot more, but, we do want to let everybody know that if you do want to be a guest on our show, I did pop the email up. I'll pop it up again. Or if you're interested in sponsoring our show, we would be welcome to any kind of sponsorships of our show. But let me share with you our email again, because like I said, we have some guests planned out into the new year, but we are welcoming anybody that wants to be a guest on our show. If there's a specific topic that you guys want us to talk about, please let us know.
And we want this show, obviously we know what's important to us, but we want to know what's important to you. And so comment in the comment box, send us a message, send us an email, let us know what's important to you, so that we are addressing the things that you want to hear about. That's what we want to do. All right. Well, thank you all so much for coming and for viewing. We hope you have a happy Thanksgiving and a wonderful weekend. And Marla, any last parting words?
I just wanted to say thank you for everybody. Thank you, Courtney, for being here. And again, happy Thanksgiving to all of you. I know the holiday season is coming and it's going to be stressful. So we wanted to say thank you to everybody that took the time today to watch us. And again, if you are watching this on the replay, again, thank you. Please know that you can still comment and share the show. But again, thank you and happy Thanksgiving to everyone.
All right. And happy Thanksgiving to you too, Marla.
Take care, Brian. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.